Alright, so this demonstration is going to show how to use Autodesk Meshmixer and how to use it in fixing and repairing 3D scanned people, objects, or whatever. So first off, I'm going to go to Google Chrome, and this is where you can get Autodesk Meshmixer from, www.meshmixer.com/download. You can select what your download type is, and they do have some forums and stuff for asking things, and some tutorial videos. If you go to the main page, you can also download directly from there, and they've got some stuff for some tutorials and then what's been added to latest releases. They're not bad to watch. I don't remember if they have audio or not. I just think they show how the tools work. So typically, well, first I'm just going to open up just a basic file just to kind of go over the interface. So as far as navigating around, we hold Alt and left click to rotate around objects, Alt middle mouse click to pan, and then Alt right click to zoom in and out, or you can push this way as well. If you just middle mouse click, you can rotate around, but you can either do it by Alt left click, and these are kind of like Maya controls or Adobe Autodesk Maya or Autodesk Mudbox. So there's that. So at the bottom of this rabbit you can see there's a big giant hole. So the big giant hole needs to be fixed, or else it's not going to be 3D printable. So I'm going to go through how to fix that in a moment, but I want to show again the interface. So file, normally what I'll do is actually let me just open up one of the files. So anytime you go to open here, so if you go to open, it's going to open up the native Meshmixer files. Most of the stuff though is going to be import, so I'm going to go to import. Now with most of the files coming in, I've had to flip the ZY axis on import. I don't check remember my choice just in case it doesn't happen to work that way. So then we have three options. Cancel, obviously we're going to cancel the import. Append, which means we're going to add to the scene we currently have open, which is this bunny, or replace. More often than not you'll be doing replace. So we're just going to do replace. So I want to go to how I have my file structure set up. So I've got one folder for PLY files. These are the ones that I receive that need fixed. All of the files that we have that are going to be fixed have the name of the individual and a number associated with them and a scale associated with it. So we have to remember to keep in mind this scale, and which is pretty easy to do. You open the file, you divide by this number, and you get your scale. And I'll show how to do that. So I'm just going to go with the first one here, John. So I'll open that up. Bunny will disappear, and we find John. So a couple things. When we open up the John file, we can see that John is at an angle. So we could fix that. Before we get to fixing John though, we also can export from here, and we also have some preferences. So these are the preferences that I have set up. Navigation mode, I'm going to use Meshmixer. These are the ones that work more like the Autodesk products besides 3D Studio Max. Works more like Maya or Mudbox. Enable basic rendering, I've unchecked. This allows you to kind of apply some different ways that your textures can look. Enable free rotate, that's also been unchecked. Reset camera on scene change, I just leave that on, that's fine. Show object browser, so if I turn that on, we'll see the object browser pop up. This just lets us know what different objects here. This can come in handy. We can close it, or we can delete things doing this. Mesh color mode. all of the meshes that we receive are vertex color. They're done by vertex color, so we just have to keep in mind vertex color. The mesh normal mode, you have vertex normals, face normals, group normals. This is the default. I just leave it on there. Under File, we can also set that by default flip the Z and Y axis on import. We can have that. We can export. So the export here is by default selected objects only. We can import OBJ objects, and it will do its best to load the materials and textures. And then the STL files, it's merging here says adaptive. You can also merge vertices, which is probably what it should be set up, but we don't get any STL files, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. Dialogues, these are the import, so the boxes that come up. So this says import always ask. I leave it as always ask. I don't know why it's here twice. I don't know if there was supposed to be another word here for export, but I leave it at that. 3D print, we don't have a printer set up, so we're not going to be printing. Don't click this because you don't have a printer set up, and more than likely it might crash when trying to look at that. So those are the settings you're going to want to have. Alright, under actions we have undo, of course, redo. You can copy, paste, configure units. So the units we are going to work in are going to be millimeters, very important. So this is where I could divide this number by 20. Any of the numbers actually, it'll do all of them together. I normally do Y because that's the height here. So I divide that by 20. You can either do it by calculator, just nice and easy. So I could say, okay, little Johnny here is 1705. Sometimes there might be decimals there. Divided by 20, and we get 85.25. And then I can just go copy, come back here, Control V to paste that in. I'll see my numbers all update, and I always set my grid size back to 10. I don't know that it does much besides affecting the different levels of snap that you have, but I just leave it at 10, or change it to 10, I should say. Okay, so we did that under configure units. We can also do that in another area here, which I'll show. We're not going to mess around with setting targets or clearing targets, so we don't have to worry about that. View, so you can recenter the view just by clicking that. So we've centered in there. You can recenter at cursor, so that's pressing, I don't know if you have to press Shift C or just C, but let's see, must be Shift C because it's a capital C. We're zoomed in now. Let's see. Okay, yeah, it looks like you can just press C. The previous view and next view, this has to only do with if I zoom in here and I go to previous view and I go again, it's just taking note of every time the camera has been moved here to look around. And so if I keep going previous, it'll go back to the side view I was at a moment ago, right there. Kind of helpful, I guess, not really. Toggle visibility. So watch when pasting, because that would also be Control V, but that has to do with the visibility of objects here. Hide objects in the browser, so that's Control Shift O, or that's hiding the browser or turning it back on. Show all is Control Shift V. Wireframe, if we were to look at our wireframe, obviously it's going to be very dense. It's actually 140,870 triangles. Or tri-polygons. So we'll turn that off. Not really too helpful having that on. The bounds we don't really need. And I turn the grid on only to really align my object to the grid. So after that we have some help stuff I don't really use. That's basically it for the main toolbar. Under here we have import, which is the same as import here. We have mesh mix. So there's a couple of pre-made kind of primitive objects. So we can see I have a bunny rabbit. I don't know what the bunny rabbit has to do so much with 3D printing and Meshmixer, but it's in there. But you also have other ones. So there are some arms, some hands, some different type of frog-looking appendages, and some other arms. So I'll come back. So we have some ears as well. Nice human ear to use here. Heads, legs, letters, miscellaneous. So there's this top character here. Numbers. Again, I don't know why primitives is, because it looks like they're listed here multiple times for some of them. Symbols, same arms it looks like, same ears. So I don't know why these are in here multiple times. And then I have my parts. These are parts that I've cut off of other people or created myself, and I can reuse. Like I took the ear that was in there and I shrunk it down to the size that I wanted, and I made a new part based on just this ear. So in case I need an ear and I need to attach it, I can just click and drag it in, and I have an ear, and I can move that. So you can see I have snap turned on here. That's what this S is. If I turn that off, it will no longer snap to the grid. And this object is way out here. So I could bring that over by the little boy's head. And so I had resized it. I had gotten tired of using the one that they had. So I'm just going to cancel on that. And the object's there. I'm just going to delete it. You can also hit delete. But that's what that is. So make sure our objects are always selected. It's pretty good about giving you warnings for things as well. So I'm going to go to select. So select will allow me to basically select. I can use the left and right brackets to make my brush size larger or smaller. I can hold Control to remove selection, or if I just I can go back to painting in a selection. And then once things are painted, I've got a bunch of different options for exactly what I do with those selections. So this is where I could I had made that ear and I could reuse it, so I could convert it to a solid part and reuse it. There's some deforming, which we'll talk about, some modifying there, and then some other options here for selecting. Okay, so I'm going to hit escape to get out of select. Then we have sculpting. So the sculpting, there's a bunch of tools here for sculpting. Different brushes. So drag allows you to kind of, if you're going to drag out a horn or something from here, that's kind of how that would work. Different drawing tools. So this is if you were kind of wanting to build up some areas. This draw, I don't really understand the difference between these ones so much. Flatten will, if I kind of rub over the same area for a while, you can see it kind of flattens it out. And if I undo, a little bit, you can't see it much. It also depends on what your brush settings are set to. So there's this kind of flat plateau, this kind of ease in and ease out, this obtuse shape, point shape, and very narrow point. Inflate allows you to bulge areas out. It works pretty good. Pinch for kind of scrunching areas in. I'm just hitting Control Z after each one. Move is really handy. So it kind of works like you might think drag was, but you can actually use it to, if I have to keep moving an area out or something like that, or adjusting, where something is, I can do that. So that works really nicely. Spikes. So that's what spikes does. It kind of will keep building out in the area you're looking at here. So kind of see, kind of a weird tool. Haven't really found a lot of use for it. I don't really use that one. Paint Vertex, there's actually a better paint, which I'll get to in a minute. Attract, I think you have to have a target in order to do this attraction. And then there's a couple different smoothing types: bubble smooth, shrink smooth, and robust smooth. I will typically use bubble and robust. There's also some of these tools, which I'm going to show them when I need to use them. I don't need to use them just yet. So I'm just going to kind of get back to them. So this is showing if you hold down Shift while you're using one of the other brushes, like this drag one. If I hold Shift, I will automatically switch to one of these types of smoothing brushes. And if I release Shift, I'll go back to the brush I had selected. These colors, this is only when you start painting, so don't really need to worry about that. So then we have the brush strength, the size of the brush, and the depth. And I find that the depth kind of goes hand in hand with the strength. You can adjust it, but I normally will let it default to whatever the strength is. Laziness, what that does is as I'm drawing, it kind of gives a little bit of lag to smooth out what I'm doing. So instead of me kind of sitting here and being really jumpy, it's kind of smoothing out all the mouse movements. So laziness is kind of cool. Symmetry I keep off. Flow, volumetric I keep on. You can turn those off. The refinement here, what refinement does is it allows you to, it's basically how we have the triangles here. If I turn on my wireframe, if I start sculpting, let's see, I'll do move, and I leave, I'm going to turn refinement on. What happens is it starts building more polygons to kind of it creates polygons as I do this, so that I'm not just pulling out. Like if I turn this back off, in this case it's just stretching the ones that are here, whereas refinement is building new ones. So you have to be careful with doing that. And then there's filters here: hold boundary, preserve groups, restrict to group, adaptive refinement. I don't really know what adaptive does. Never really messed with it much. Oh, would also help if I had that turned on. Not really sure. Haven't really had to use it. So also under sculpt, so right now we're doing volumetric things. If we switch to surface, this is actually where I find we get better paint and smoothing of color. So if I click paint, I can now go in and select a color. So I'll do red, and as I start painting it, what's going on? Let me paint. Oh, my strength isn't up very high. There's my brush, and I'll turn my strength up. You can also right click in the viewport, and without hitting anything, change your strength, which is nice. So you can see I can just paint on here, and using the smooth, I can, let me turn wireframe off. I can blend in those colors so they're a little more gradual. When I turn the strength up here, you'll see it blend a lot more. Come on. Something's froze up here. There we go. So you can see the blurring happen a lot more. Okay, so I'm going to undo before I colored there. I normally find that to be really nice to do. Got a lot of work to do in the shoulders here. But I find blending to be really good to do after the fact. So I might go in and add some little amounts of red in here to kind of match the front of the shirt. And I don't want to get these weird, you know, I'm not going to be able to, I wish it had a color picker so I could just pick a color that's nearby and paint from that, but I kind of have to eyeball the color, and then I use blend to blend them together so it's not so noticeable. and a lot of the other tools here. You'll notice with mine, my refinement is turned off on these. The stencils, which I'm sure you could import other PNGs or something, they work really nicely. So if you're kind of, let's see, hard to see on that side. Okay. So you can see they kind of follow this pattern here. I actually use this a lot for when I'm doing hair. If a person's hair, you'll see how if I have to fill in a hole on a person's head, it'll try to blend as best as it can with the color. But actually, let me select and delete, and I'll show you how it kind of fixes the hole. But I'm going to kind of do one of these from start to end. So I'm going to select, and I'm just going to select the top of the head here, and I'll hit delete. Okay, so kind of see how there's this blue outline. So keep in mind that blue outline lets us know that there are holes in our mesh. So I'm going to make my select brush small. I'm going to double click by the line. Okay, so what ended up happening was it selected everything. I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to go a little bit closer to the line. And I double click and it outlines the hole. Now if I hit F, it's going into the fill command. So by default I want to use smooth MVC. I don't know what MVC stands for, but I use that. And most of the time the settings here I don't change except for scale and bulge. So what scale does is it either kind of sounds like it would be what bulge does, but I can scale out, and I'll normally just scale out to where I'm like, okay, that looks about how the hat should be. And then bulge kind of, if I go into a negative value, kind of sinks in more. So this usually best result is if it's somewhere near 0. So I might affect it just slightly by kind of changing that, but I do my scale first. But it seems to, for the most part, try to match up these holes as much as possible. And I hit accept, and I'm going to hit escape to get out of select, but you'll see how the color here has kind of become almost one tone. It does a very good job of trying to blend with all the different colors that are around the hole. It does a pretty good job of that, but in case I need to go in and paint in a little bit, I could go in with black and just kind of dot this up a little and blur it so it doesn't look like such a flat color. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I'll show some of the other tools as I kind of do stuff. So I'm going to import this character back in, and I'm just going to do this from the very beginning, kind of show the full process of what I do. So I'm just going to click replace. So what I do first is I'm going to select the name of the character here. I'm going to copy this part here of the name. So Control C or right click, copy, and I'm going to open that up. So the first thing I'm going to do is save. So I'm going to save as, and I'm going to come back to, most of the files or folders I use are going to be PLY files where I save the originals, and then the fixed files. But while I'm working on them, I save in this work in progress. And then in each one of those folders I have an archived folder where when I'm all the way done with a group of them, I just put them in here after I've sent them off to Chuck. So I'm just going to Control V to paste in the name, unless you like retyping stuff. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So I'll save, and you'll see this now turns to a .mix file. I want to do this because every now and then it looks like it tries to autosave, just in case I mess something up. It's nice to have that, so if for some reason I do something and the program crashes, it's nice to have this. So starting off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to Analyze. So under Analyze, there's an inspector. So what the inspector will do is, if I click it, it's going to highlight any holes. And there's actually no holes in this character, which is kind of great. Doesn't always happen that way. But if there was a hole, I would see the hole light up, and I would see, actually let me create a hole just so you can see what that looks like. So make my brush big here. Now delete right there. So I'm going to go to inspector, and the inspector is going to give me this big blue sphere and kind of show me where's that hole at. So the hole's here. So what it'll do is I can have it fix all of the holes at once, but there's some holes that I don't want it to fix based on how it fixes. So I'll fix some holes that need a little bit more care or detail first, and usually that'll be the feet, and then I'll let the inspector fix, if there are 100 holes all over his shirt or under his armpit or something, I'll let the inspector try to fix those. I don't do flat fill. I'm going to do smooth fill for most everything here. So I'll do smooth fill. I'll hit done. Oops. Sorry. Smooth fill, auto repair all, and it's going to fix that hole, and I'll select done. So now I'm going to undo before I made a big hole in his chest. I'm sure the kid wouldn't appreciate that. So I'm going to go to, not measure, sorry, units. And this is where I'm going to put in my numbers here. So divide by 20 to get my size. I have my number here. So I'll just copy that and paste that in. Control V, enter. Okay, so the size is the right size, so I know that's good. I'll set this back to 10, and I'll say done. And then I'll save. So at the very least, I've got that done. Next, I'm going to go to Edit. So under Edit, I'm going to go to Transform. This is going to allow me to move, rotate this character. I can also hit T for Transform, and that'll come up. So right now it's working off of local space. I'm going to switch to world space. Local space, what happens is as I rotate, the arrows here stay oriented to what the character was rotated at, whereas world space is always going to stay aligned to world. So I'm just going to switch to world, and I'm going to rotate this little boy. I'll move him up. And I am going to have snap turned off for this. So I'm going to go to where I can kind of see flat here. I'll move his feet up above the line. And I typically try to move whatever the base is here down below the line just slightly. I'll show you why in a minute. And I'm going to make sure that he looks like he's standing up straight here. And I'd say he is maybe just a little bit off, but there we go. 1 degree off. I don't know why. It's not really that necessary to be that precise, I don't think, but alright. So I like where he's placed. I also try to make sure that they're looking kind of down the axis here. So I could always rotate him just slightly. I mostly just do that for things on the head, so that way in case I end up putting an ear on him, I can just delete the ear on this side or flatten it and flatten the one on this side, and then when I place an ear here I can mirror it over and it mirrors over nicely. So once I'm done kind of positioning him, I'm going to say accept and save. So now I know that's done. Alright, so now it comes to the point of removing the platform, or in some cases fixing holes in the feet. And I normally fix holes that are in the feet or try to repair the feet first while the platform is here, because if there's a big hole here and there's a platform, I can try to fill it in. Once any holes are filled in, the next part that I do is under Edit, I'm going to use Plane Cut, and we'll see this giant plane show up. And so what it's going to do is tell me that it's going to cut off, half. Well, obviously I don't want to cut off that half, so I'm going to rotate this, And if I stick to the circle here, I can snap to those degrees. If I go outside the circle or inside the circle, I'll get smaller degrees. So I'm going to rotate to 90, and I'll use the snap to 90 here. And I'm going to drag this down. And so what I'm looking for is I want to cut off that plane. So I'm going to move it up to where it's just outlining his feet. And if there's a little left over, I can delete that after if it's really bothering me. Or I can try to come above it and make sure I'm not cutting off too much of the feet. That's actually not too bad. So once I have that, I'm going to leave this set to cut and delete refine, and I'll say accept. Now when I do that, it puts in geometry here. But the way it does it is it's actually splitting it into groups. It's still one piece. As you can see, I don't have any extra pieces here, but apparently there are sort of like smoothing groups in here. So right after I do that, I'll hit select, and if I double click this, you'll see it only selects that part. Now I can grow my selection by right clicking in the viewport and dragging up, and I can also shrink it by clicking and dragging down. So I'm just going to click and drag up. I'm going to go to modify and clear face group, and that'll fix that. So now if I was to hit select, which shortcut for select is S, I can double click and you'll see it selects the entire character. What I can also do is, if I would have had little pieces left over here, I could go to I think it's under under modify, and I can select invert. And if there's anything extra, like if there's a little piece here, I could hit delete and delete that extra piece. There's nothing there, so I'll just clear selection. Okay, so we have that now. Now we're mostly going in and either patching up some holes. Sometimes you'll get big holes that are in the legs, and I try to repair those myself rather than letting the inspector do it here in analysis. So what I'm going to do is, there are no holes as far as I can tell. I can always check by just going to analysis, inspector, and make sure no little spheres show up that have arrows. If the spheres show up and they're blue, that usually means they're easy to fix. If you have red ones, those are going to be the ones that are a little harder to fix, and they'll actually it'll repair, but sometimes it does a really nasty job doing it. So there are a couple tricks that we can do for trying to fix those kind. I don't have any, so I'm just going to say done. And now I'm going to go to the sculpt brush. So switch over to volumes, and I'm going to go to the bubble smooth tool. And I'm going to come down to the feet. So what's nice is now I can kind of smooth out and fix any of these holes. There's actually this would end up causing an error with the print. So I'm going to go to select, and I'm going to scale down my selection by hitting left bracket. And I'm just going to click, and it'll select pretty much most of that. I'm going to right click and grow my selection, and I'm going to hit delete, and I'm just going to get rid of those what it was creating there. So these are easy to fix. All I got to do is I can either paint all the way around it and select, but I have to make sure I get I can't do both holes at once that way. So I'm going to hit Control Z, whoops, and I'm going to just double click. And when I do that, it might try to get the other one. And if I tried to do both of these that are have joined selection areas here, it's not going to work. If I hit, okay, it worked in that case. Like 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work. So if it works, thank your lucky stars. So I'll just say accept. And now I can go back to my sculpt tool, and I'm just going to grow this brush. I'm going to bring my strength down. I find that strength of like between 25 and 30 allows me to smooth over some of these holes like where I have this part kind of bulged in, I can kind of paint over this and try to get rid of some of those like really far indented areas. If I hold Control, I'll actually kind of squeeze everything in a little bit, and then I'm just gonna kind of smooth that out until that weird bulge is kind of gone. And I can always do this as well. If I go to Select and I just select that area and hit F, I will erase and fill it, and I can get rid of weird things that way too. So sometimes, like with things like this, I'll just hit F, maybe grow the selection out here a little bit. As you can see, I accidentally left that selected. I'll hit F, and now that little nodule thing there isn't poking out. You just have to be careful with using the sculpt tool, because I could go to fill in a hole that's here and accidentally fill this in to where there's no dip in between the feet. So I'm going to try to fix this as much as possible here so we don't have this dented in so far. And then I'll probably have to just fix what's here. And so this just smooths everything out and keeps the feet from looking too weird. So I'll probably later go and paint just a dark line there and kind of blur it out a little, so that way I don't get it looking like his feet are really joined together. So that's pretty good for the base for the most part. This part here could be pulled in a bit. The brush that I would use for that, I find that Inflate works because I can hit Control, shrink my brush down a little. I can hit Control and kind of push some areas in. It's sometimes hard to tell. You can kind of see it doing it here slowly. If I turn my strength up, it'll work a lot faster, and I can kind of push these areas in a little. And then if I use same bulge tool, but now I bulge out around these areas, what it'll do is kind of give me more of a crease in there. Okay. And I'll have to fix the bottom of the pants here. But you can see the front and the back of the mesh is usually something to do with the lights causes the back of the character to be a lot brighter. So that's just something you have to paint out. So going back and using the bubble smooth, then I can see another kind of weird little nodule thing here, so I can get rid of that, because those don't always smooth out nicely, and it's just easier to do this, Control to expand my selection, hit F, and kind of fix that. There are some areas that we can't just do that on. So kind of explain what I think is going on with this mesh. So you can see here in the front we've got the kid's shoulders, and on the back, when he was scanned, his shoulders are lower. He might have been raising his shoulders up while he was standing there, and as the person who was scanning got around to the back, he might have lowered his shoulders down so he's not really shrugging. He could have moved, whatever. So some of this stuff can be a little bit tricky to fix. I found a couple of different ways of going about fixing these. One being I can try to select this area, and I'll try this and see if it works. Doesn't always work the way I would want it to. And I'll remove a little bit of this. So I'm going to try to fill this in. So I'll hit F for fill, and so it tries to smooth this out a little bit. This is where bulge can kind of come in, scale and bulge. And I'll accept that. And now whenever I go to smooth here with my sculpting tool, I can smooth this out and make my brush a bit bigger. And then obviously this kid's not going to have this giant growth on his shoulder, but I'll come back to that in a second. I'm going to do the same thing on, actually this one's close enough that we might just be able to use smooth to kind of fix that up. And I'm going to hold control, and control is going to actually push down his shoulder a little bit there. And that's what I can try to do on this side. If I hold control, you can see that using bubble smooth with control allows you to kind of push in some of these areas. You have to be careful and have your strength turned down though. So I'll just kind of work over this until it looks like his shoulder's about in the right spot. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. And just pull this down on this side a little more. This is where the move tool also comes in handy. Okay, so I'm going to smooth this out. I'm actually going to turn my brush a little bit stronger just because some of these are really just coming out a little bit strange. I can already tell you that this area is not going to smooth well, so I'm going to go to select, make my brush smaller, and I'm going to delete and make 2 holes, and then I can fix each hole individually. So I'll bulge that out a little bit. Accept. I'm going to hit escape, hit S again, that way I don't have the other side selected. Hit F, fill that in, accept, and hit escape to get out of select. Make my brush larger and kind of fill this in. Like some of this is just going to be kind of ugly, and it'll take a little bit of work to kind of get used to fixing some of these things. The nice thing about this smoothing tool though is that if I do get an area that's maybe bulging out too far, I just hold control and go back over it, and it'll kind of push it back in while smoothing. Whereas the other one can sometimes bulge out a little bit while smoothing. I don't use smooth at all on the face because I don't want to distort the face. So those, sometimes the hands, instead of just clicking and dragging, I just kind of touch those up. Otherwise you can really mess up the hands based on the way you're smoothing. And I'll try to leave some of the wrinkles in. Sometimes I'll make my brush really large, turn the strength down to like 15, and come over some of these just to kind of smooth them up a little bit, but I don't want to lose a lot of the detail there. This also works for just fixing minor areas. Make my brush smaller, kind of fix some of these issues. Make the brush bigger. I just kind of keep doing that until I've got most of the areas that have like big ugly holes in them just kind of fixed up. Let's see here. Holding control here. Kind of trying to fix this area. Still a bit ugly. I'm just doing select and F to fill that in. That way it'll get flattened out a little bit. Sometimes it's just easier to do that. Come back to sculpt and just flatten that back out. Alright, so you can see his sleeve kind of gets flat here. So I'll use inflate. And I typically use this pointed fall off brush I find it to work really good for these things, and I find it to work a lot better than the draw tool, because I don't really like how the draw tool functions. But like I can come over the wrinkles here and kind of fix some of them, or add some back in, push some areas in. That way his shirt looks a little bit more natural. And might do the same here, just to make this sleeve kind of bulge out around the arm. And I like this because then I can hold shift and smooth at the same time. And I also like using bulge because it allows me to kind of make better creases in some areas. I'll come back over here and fix the back of his sleeve a little bit. And then kind of smooth that back out. Okay. So next we got to look at fixing poor little guy's ear. Not really sure. He must have moved a bit. So I'm going to use smooth to kind of fix this part. I'm going to have to turn this a lot stronger. I could also select this and then I'll hit F, kind of fix some of this. Oops. F. And then it's like he's got a double ear going on here. So he's got his ear there and back here. So in this case I'll show how to bring in the other ear and kind of attach it on and kind of work with it. So hit F to fix the double ear that was going on there and smooth that out, and hold Control to kind of push in here. And then I'm just going to smooth this out. This will be where I put his other ear on. Oh, okay, that's just the texture that makes it look like there's a big bump there. Just smooth that out a bit. I'm just holding Control and kind of trying to fix that. And I do the texture parts last. Once I feel like I've gotten the geometry all kind of fixed up. Alright, so I'm going to hit S to select and just kind of paint out this extra ear that's in. F to fill it in. Accept. Smooth. Just kind of pushing these areas back in and holding Control. That's pretty good. Okay, and then the top of his hat and his bill. And that'll probably finish up most of his repair part. So I'm going to try removing. So I'm going to hit select the mesh that's kind of joint here. Kind of like that. Paint that out. And just kind of even this out a little bit. So it's kind of selecting the same amount around this ridge. And I'll hit F. So that's going to delete and remove what was there. So let's hit accept. And then sculpt, and sculpt this to kind of fix what's going on there. Alright, so now it's just a matter of lowering some of this down, so I'll hold control. And try to even this out. That's pretty good. Alright, so now we get into a trickier thing. Fixing this bill. It's not as easy as just, selecting and filling and hoping it works. More often than not, it's not going to work. So the way I can go about fixing it is I can either try to rebuild a bill, which is probably not going to, it's going to take a little bit of time to do that, and it's kind of a headache. So what I can do is remove some of the geometry. And the technique I'm going to use is bridge. So I'm going to make my brush pretty small, go into select, and I'm going to remove, basically creating a hole around the edge of the bill here. So I'll just select that. I'm trying to be as delicate as possible about this. And try to get the bottom as well. Not always an easy task to get everything first time through. So more than likely I'll delete and I'll get all these little fragmented parts that I couldn't see. Okay. And I'm going to deselect some of these little extra jagged pieces that I had ended up selecting on accident. So I'm just holding control and removing those from selection. Actually, I'm going to select like that. Okay, so I'm going to delete there. And I'm also going to select, I should have just done this at the same time. I'm going to make my brush size a bit bigger. And I'm going to select the area where the hat will end up attaching to. So somewhere along the lines of there. Trying not to select too much of the kid's head at the same time. And if this makes the bill a little bit thick, that's fine, because the bill needs to be a little bit thicker so it'll print properly anyway. So I'm just trying to get some of these areas here. Getting a bit too much though. Wasn't sure if I wanted to add or subtract some of this. Okay, so I'm going to hit delete on that as well. There is an option for smoothing boundaries. Something I'm going to do real quick is just double click to select all of him, and I'm going to go to invert. Under modify, invert, shortcut is I. and I'm going to delete. That's just in case I had any weird little fragmented polygons just floating there. Okay, so I've got this. Now I'm going to double click this hole, and I'm going to try something. It's an option called Smooth Boundary. Right here, shortcuts B. So what that will attempt to do is create a new boundary around here that's nice and smooth rather than having all these little jagged shapes. So I'm going to see what it's trying to create. I'm going to say accept, and I'll get that smooth boundary. I'm going to right click and basically select that and this area and do clear face group, just like I did with the shoes. Some reason when you do smooth boundary, it creates again really creates separate groups, which can be a problem. Okay, so I'm going to select now, and I'm going to bridge, because if I just tried to fill this hole, it's basically just going to recreate the problem I had here. I want to try to make this two holes, a hole that will be on top and a hole that will be on bottom. So to do that, I need to bridge across here. This bridge tool kind of works most of the time, but if you get it to work, it works well. So there's basically, let's say, 4 edges that I've got selected here. And I'm going to select 1, 2, 3, 4, roughly. And we'll see what happens. So I'm going to go to Edit, Bridge. Alright, it's going to say fatal error. No. Keeping in mind fatal error, let's save. Save. Okay. So what that means is more than likely there are extra faces here selected that it doesn't like. So I'm going to remove those and that and try bridge again. Bridge. Now it likes it. And I look at it and I'll go, yeah, that's good enough for now. I'll say accept. I'm going to right click, make my selection nice and big there, modify, clear face group, just in case. I can't remember if when it bridges it creates a face group from that, but that's what I'll be doing there. So the reason I tried to go a couple of edges wide on each side is because if I don't, you saw before whenever I selected the hole automatically, it would select the one near it as well. I kind of want to keep that from happening as much as possible. So I'm going to go to select, I'm going to double click this line, and we'll see it did just that, unfortunately. And that's kind of tricky to fix, so without just completely deselecting the bottom section here, which is more than likely what I'll have to do, which is kind of a problem. Actually, let's try something. I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to see what the inspector does to try to fix this, if it will do it at all, if it can treat it as 2 separate holes. So let's give that a shot. Inspector. See, so it paints it red. Paints it red because it doesn't like that these areas are so close together. So I'm going to hit escape. So my next option is I'm going to use the zipper edge. So what the zipper edge does is it allows you to move some edges a little bit closer together. Let's make sure close enough here. Might need to make my brush a bit bigger. And so what I want it to do is basically bring these edges close together. I'm going to turn my strength up a little. Okay, so now that these areas have been kind of squeezed together, because that's what this does, is if I go from a very narrow point, it'll try to pull them together. So now I'm going to go to select, and I'm going to select around this zippered area. And again, this is another one of those things that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And deselect some of this here. So I'll go to edit, weld boundaries, and it says no. of course. So this is what we'll do. I'm going to do a new selection here. I'm going to turn my brush a lot smaller. And I'm just going to try to select a small group of them that are touching. Weld boundaries. Okay, so I saw it change. That lets me know that it's trying to weld there. I say accept, and it does a decent job of trying to weld those together. Okay, so now I'm getting this to where this is all one selection on the bottom. That's a good sign. So I'm going to hit F, and there we go. So it's fixed that area up nice. I'm going to say accept, hit escape so I don't have that still selected, and then I'll do this one again. S for select, double click on the edge. If you don't get right on the edge, it'll select everything. Just hit undo. There, got everything. Sometimes I'll make my selection just a little bit bigger. Hit F, and there's the rest of the hat. So I'll say escape or accept, hit escape, and that's fixed up his hat pretty well. The only part that I notice is I'll probably go back now with sculpt, come back to the bubble tool here, bubble smooth, and kind of round this out. So I'm just holding control, kind of bringing some of these parts in there, and then releasing control to smooth that out. And same for this side. Yeah, that's worked pretty good for his hat. Okay, so the boy's almost done as far as I think most of the sculpting things to fix. His arm did become a little bit wide here, just because he had kind of a double arm thing going on. So I'm just gonna hold control, kind of drag down around there. And that way his arm's getting pushed in just a little bit each direction, so he doesn't have a giant arm. Let's also try pinch. If I make this large enough, I can kind of do this also. Just kind of pull areas in a little bit. It just kind of scrunches everything down a little. Use the move tool. What? Oh, whoops, move. Just kind of move this up a little bit so his hand looks about the right size there. That arm kind of looks okay. Alright, so now for the ears. So I'm going to just go to File, Save. Anytime you're going to add additional mesh, you want to save before you do that, because otherwise you can run into problems pretty quickly. So I'm going to go to my mesh mix. And like I said, I've already got an ear that I use that I like. So I'm just going to click it, drag it on here, and just kind of zoom out. And there's my ear. So first I just try to place the ear where it should go. Top of the ear should usually line up around the eye. Bottom of the ear should line up somewhere around the mouth. Rotate this a little bit. And the earlobe should hit somewhere along the jawline. Rotate this just slightly, and I'm going to rotate it out a little bit just to get it away from the head. Okay, so I kind of like the placement of the ear. Looks a little large though for this guy. Let's scale it down just a little bit. So I'm scaling either from the middle here, or I can scale in one direction from those, from the top and sides. Bring that forward again. Looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to hit accept, and I'm going to hit mirror, and move my mirror plane over towards the middle of his nose, towards the middle of the head as much as possible. Say accept, and that's pretty close. So now all I have to do is go into select. Right now I've automatically got that ear selected, so I can double click that, hit T, and I'll transform, and I can just move the selected part to where it needs to go. So that looks pretty good. I need to come back just a little bit and accept. Okay. So before adding this, I'm going to go back and select the little John kid. I'm going to go to sculpt. I'm going to go to inflate, and I'm going to make my brush smaller here. I'm going to hold control, and I'm just kind of pushing this in enough to where I don't see his head poking through the ear, so that'd be weird. Okay. So the command that we're going to use is called boolean. Boolean is taking one object that is watertight, which means has no holes, and connecting it to another part that's watertight. Problem is I've got two sections here on either side of its head. So what I need to do is hit select. Select the ears first. Hit select with S. Double click this ear, and I'm going to hit Y. And what Y does is it separates them, so it'll create another ear basically. Alright, so there's my other ear. We can see if I come back to the original ear, I can turn this one on and off. And actually I have to do it that way so that I can boolean this properly. So I'll select the boy, I'll select the first mesh, and I'll say boolean union. And so what I should see is the little boy turns pink, the little ear turns blue, and if everything looks good, I don't get any warnings, I'll hit accept. And now that ear is part of his head. And now I just hold shift, select the other one, boolean union, hit accept. And now those are all one part. Now I can go in and start painting. So again, I'm going to save before I start painting. So I'll do File, Save. And so now I can paint. So one of the things I'm going to do first is I'm going to blur. So I'm going to go to Sculpt, switch this to Surface, switch this to Smooth Color, and I'm going to try to fix some just weird areas first. So make my brush big. I'm going to make my strength pretty big, and I'm just going to kind of go over some of these areas, make them not as noticeable. Because then I can paint some of this out as well. Where I find it really works is on the skin, because usually there's like dark shadows where the I had that double mesh thing going on, so this helps get rid of some of that. Turn this on more. And then I just kind of go over some of this to start with. Because it makes it a little bit easier whenever I go to paint. Now if these shadows are here because of muscle definition, I don't want to get rid of those, so I'll keep those. And I'll have to paint some flesh tone back in here. Also go and blur some of the like weird colors that might be showing up in the neck. And I want to be really careful around the face. So I'm going to make my brush really small. I don't want to mess with the mouth, the nose, or the eyes too much. The nose is not such a problem, but I don't want to go under and mess it up. So I'm trying to remove any hint that there was like a double ear as well. So I just kind of blur those areas over. Or that he's got this big dark mark on his neck. Kind of go over his forehead a little. Okay. So I'm going to do the flesh tone separately. So I'm just going to go to Paint Vertex and Color, and I'm going to turn my stencil off here. If anything, I'm going to end up using this stencil, but I'm just going to go back to full color. And I'm guessing his shirt's actually red. The lights can cause it to come out a little bit more on the pink side here. So what I'll do is I'm going to turn my strength down to about 10. And I can go in and just kind of lightly add some red to this. I'm watching it don't go over like his necklace there, medallion or whatever it was. This allows me to kind of redden up some of this. Make my brush smaller for these parts so I don't mess up. And then I'll end up blurring this after. I'm going to go in and go for a darker red right now. And the reason I do the color first instead of the skin tone is because I don't want to accidentally paint over the skin tone. Okay, so I'm going to make my brush big again, keep it down on the low setting, and then I'll put this back to full red. And I'm just going to kind of go over this very easily, just to kind of get the back of the shirt to be a little closer to the front of the shirt, the red on the front. Oops, let's make the brush a little bit smaller here in a second. Only problem is when it's smaller you have to go a bit faster because it'll fill in faster. Okay, it's pretty good. I'll go in with a dark one, turn this up a little bit, and just kind of go and paint the shaded areas a little bit since I removed some of the color value to these shadows. I don't have to worry if I get too sloppy because I can always paint the parts of the skin or whatever over again, as long as I feel okay with it. I might go with a brighter red again. once I have that, then I'll come back with the blur brush and kind of blur this all in a bit. And that kind of helps it look a little bit more natural. And now I don't have the big white line basically going down there separating the front and the back of the body. And then I'll have to do the same thing at the bottom of the pants here. Pants are sometimes a little bit harder to match the colors on, at least for me. Oh, that's my blur brush. Let's see. That's actually not too far off. So I'll paint that in first. And I'm going to come back with a much darker version. And paint this area down here under. Just kind of hit this area. Right now it's like looking very splotchy and stuff, but once I come in and blur some of it, it's not as noticeable. And I try not to get too perfect because then it just looks fake. So if I can kind of, you know, go quick about it and blur it out a little, it ends up, for whatever reason, I think looking a lot better. So make this brush big. Now I'll typically go over the areas that will need to be blended a bit better. So I'll blur that now. And then I'll come back in with black and bring this down. And I'm going to use this stencil. So I'm just going to kind of come over some of the parts of the legs here, again in the wrinkles. Make my brush smaller again. Like I said, it looks weird until I go back over it and blur it. I'm just going to fix that area. And sometimes I'll go back in and kind of paint around the edge of the clothing. Or if I need to separate the hands a little bit more from everything else, I'll sometimes outline them just a little bit. Or sometimes I'll come in and kind of add finger placement and blur it out. Kind of like that. Blur. I'm gonna bring my brush down. And I just kind of go over that. Bring my brush back up. of fix this so it's not so noticeable. And just come back over this and blur it out. Let's see. So the final step would be kind of coming back and just adding a very small amount of like skin tone. So I'll grab like a reddish orange, kind of very desaturated light color, and at first we'll go with like just a large kind of sweep across. And then I get my smaller brush and kind of just add. I don't want to add too much because it's going to come out a lot. Oh, you know what? I still have that stencil on. I was wondering why I was getting so spotty. Let's see how that, that's a little bit too yellowy. That's a little better. So I try to make this about as big as my the kid's arm. And just kind of fill that in. And then I'll blur it. And then I'll come back in with like a darker shade of it and kind of add in a little bit of definition there. Not definition, but shadow. Otherwise I'll get these very just peach colored arms. And then we got the ear. Make this not so bright. Change the transparency here. And normally I won't mess with the face too much. I'm just going to blur what's here. So I'll paint around the ear. I'm going to have to come back and fix the hat there. And I don't try to put too much on here. I'll just blur what it is that I have and cover it as close as I can. And just really try to leave the face alone. So until I go in and blur it, he kind of looks like he's got measles or something. And turn my setting down here. And blur around the ear. Brush a bit larger. Okay, so now his ears aren't really blending back in. So the reason being is that, just like before, if I double click them, you can see they're not, they're attached, but their smoothing group is separate. So I'm going to clear those face groups, and then whenever I come in here and I use, and for this one I like to use the robust smooth, and I can smooth the geometry here so it actually kind of blends together. I don't do the back of the ear because you should have a crease in the back of your ear anyway, but I can smooth that so that'll also blend that together a bit more. And then I'm going to come back through with a darker color now. So go with like a dark desaturated color. Turn this down a bit. Oh, it's coming out really... Oh. No, that's what I wanted. Let's bring this down a bit more. Just kind of fix what's behind the ear here. And then turn this back up. I'm just going to go with black, almost black. Oh, that's too much strength. And just kind of outline these areas a little bit. Little thing to fix there. And then blur that as well. So make this bigger. It kind of just helps add the shadow back in there. That we removed when we were painting the color in. Come back under the neck here. It just adds a little bit of shadow in there by doing that. Also, typically I'd come in, so I guess he had on white shoes, so makes it kind of hard. I don't know if he's in his bare feet or what. Looks like he had shoes on, so I don't know what color they were. I'm guessing they were white, but I might also just kind of outline this area. Where it looks like the shoes are, just to kind of emphasize that a little. And then I'll blur that. And sometimes I'll like add in where the laces would be and stuff, just kind of simple lines. Just to make it look like there were laces or whatever that the scanner might not pick up. And then I can blur that so that way I'm not like super relying on that detail. But at least now it doesn't look like he was just, I don't think he was in socks, because he's kind of got the bumps there that you would have. But now it kind of, if he's going to be, you know, this big, kind of looks like he's got shoes on there. So that's really it. I mean, it took a lot longer on this than I would typically do, but just so I could thoroughly explain everything. So hopefully that explains the different processes for using some of the different tools. So yeah, hope you had found this helpful.